Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always been a computer enthusiast, and running my own small tech repair business from home meant frequent trips to the local computer part shop. That afternoon started like any other. I had just picked up some replacement RAM and a new power supply for a client's build. Little did I know I was about to encounter the most bizarre situation of my life. I was driving back to my condo following all traffic rules as usual. My dad was a driving instructor, so proper driving etiquette was practically encoded in my DNA. That's why I was confused when I noticed a car behind me, honking nonstop. In my rearview mirror, I could see a woman absolutely losing it, pounding on her steering wheel and screaming. I found myself wondering if I had somehow cut her off without noticing. I double-checked my mirrors, replaying the last few minutes in my head. Nothing came to mind. When I approached my condo's parking lot, I decided to pull over and sort this out. The moment I stopped, she screeched to a halt behind me. What happened next was surreal. She tried jumping out of her car while it was still moving, scrambled back in to put it in park, then charged at me like a bull seeing red. I rolled down my window about to ask what was wrong. Slap! She had just open palm slapped me across the face. Me, a 6'2" guy who spent more time lifting weights than socializing in college, just got slapped by someone half my size. The urge to retaliate was strong, but my mom's voice echoed in my head. Violence is never the answer, especially against women. I reached for my phone to call the police, but when I tried getting out of my car, she grabbed my door and tried slamming it on my legs repeatedly. I asked her what her problem was and what I had done. Her response was a string of expletives, claiming she was a cop and that I couldn't mess with her. Her words were mostly incomprehensible screaming, punctuated by random profanities. I managed to get out and walk to the back of her car to write down her license plate. She followed, pushing and slapping me the whole time. Suddenly, another car pulled up. The driver called out to check if I was okay and offered help. Before I could answer, Karen jumped into her car and reversed straight at me. I barely managed to dodge behind the witness's vehicle. A second witness pulled up after she peeled away. He asked if I was all right, explaining that he had seen everything and thought the woman was crazy. Both witnesses gave me their contact information, and I called the police. They arrived 4 hours later, which was fair since it wasn't an emergency anymore. The responding officer was thorough and professional. She asked if I wanted to check the garage since the car was registered to someone in my building. We found it in the garage, but when the officer went to the registered address, she returned with interesting information. She explained that the boyfriend claimed Karen wasn't home and shared something strange. Karen was getting married in 2 days. The officer noted that based on Karen's behavior, this looked like drug-induced aggression, something she'd seen before with crack or meth users. The case dragged on for almost a year. Then, days before the court date, the officer called to warn me. She explained that Karen was claiming to have a witness who saw me attack her. While the officer didn't believe it, she wanted me to be prepared. At the courthouse, while waiting to testify, a young woman approached me. She explained that she was there to be a witness for her friend, admitting she hadn't actually seen anything, but her friend needed someone to back up her story to avoid jail. When I revealed that I was the person her friend had attacked, 2 other people in the hallway who had witnessed the original incident spoke up. They warned the woman about the serious consequences of committing perjury. The witness refused to testify when called. The judge wasn't amused and delivered a harsh sentence. Karen was ordered to pay a $5,000 fine and complete 1,000 hours of community service. Additionally, she was required to enter both rehabilitation and anger management programs within 1 week of completing her community service, with jail time as the consequence for non-compliance. 3 years later, I sold my condo but kept a garage key. Every few months, I'd stop by and let the air out of her tires. Was it petty? Absolutely. But knowing she had to repeatedly deal with flat tires brought me a satisfaction that the legal system couldn't provide. She never figured out who was doing it. Sometimes, revenge is best served with a slow leak. I was never one of the golden children in my physical education and health teacher's class. Let's call her Miss Karen. She was this nightmare of a teacher I had from 8th grade through senior year. From day one of 8th grade, she'd pick her favorites, and if you weren't one of them, you were in for a rough time. My siblings and I, we definitely weren't on her good list. Her system was pretty simple. Favorites got A+ grades no matter what they did, while the rest of us had to do every single volunteer activity and extra credit assignment just to scrape by with anything above a C. But for her least favorites, which included me and my younger brother, she went out of her way to make our lives miserable. She'd lose our assignments, misplace our doctor's notes, and honestly seemed to enjoy watching us struggle. The real nightmare started during my sophomore year. I got a concussion during basketball practice, and I mean a serious one. I couldn't keep any food down and everything was spinning. I came to class with notes from literally everyone. My doctor, the school nurse, my basketball coach, my parents, and even my grandmother. You'd think that would be enough, right? Miss Karen looked at all those notes and decided they were fake. We were playing kickball that day, and she told me I'd fail if I didn't participate. Not even 10 minutes in, I could barely stand straight. Everything was blurry even with my glasses on, and sounds were like I was underwater. I told Miss Karen that I needed to sit down, but she just coldly responded that I could sit when the game was over. When I tried to explain that I couldn't continue, she just shouted for the next kicker, completely ignoring my condition. I ended up leaning against the wall by my base, barely conscious. My classmates were trying to help, with one of them yelling at Miss Karen that I needed to go to the nurse. Another classmate even called her blind, pointing out that I was about to pass out. One of my classmates helped me to the locker room, where I promptly threw up in my gym locker. I somehow made it to the office and called my grandmother. While we were leaving, Miss Karen came running up with my purse, suddenly apologetic. She tried to excuse herself by saying she thought I would be okay and that she believed I had forged the notes. My grandmother wasn't having any of it. She told Miss Karen that I could barely write in my own handwriting, let alone copy 5 different people's. She then warned her that if she was on the school board, she'd have her out of there so fast her head would spin. A year later, I sprained my ankle getting down from the bleachers. Instead of letting me see the nurse, she made me run 3 separate mile-long runs. By the 3rd run, I was falling constantly. That ankle still gives me trouble today when I'm on my feet too long or when it's cold. The next week, she randomly decided we were doing weight training. Without any warning, she dropped a heavy dumbbell in my hand. My wrist couldn't take the sudden weight, and I dropped it. She scolded me for dropping it and demanded that I do it right this time. But the final straw wasn't even about me. It was about my younger brother. He was in 8th grade health class sitting next to this rich kid who'd been bullying him for years. While Miss Karen was teaching, this bully took a freshly sharpened pencil and stabbed my brother in the arm. My brother told Miss Karen about being stabbed, but she just threatened to send him to the principal's office for lying. When he asked to go to the nurse, she told him to wait until after class. He tried telling her he was bleeding all over the desk, but she said that no one was leaving her classroom until she said so. When my brother mentioned wanting to call our grandmother, she blocked the door and forbade anyone from making calls in her classroom. My brother's twin, who was built like a linebacker, stormed over and slammed their fist on the bully's desk, shutting him up real quick. As soon as the bell rang, my brothers ran to the office and called our grandmother and father. That was the end of Miss Karen's career. My family took it to the school board, gathering other students she'd terrorized over the years. The rich bully got off with a 2-week suspension because his family had money, but Miss Karen, she got fired and was banned from coming within 60 feet of either of my brothers. My father even gave them permission to defend themselves if she ever tried anything again. Last I heard, she's working as a substitute teacher in another district, probably making some other kids' lives miserable. But at least she can't hurt anyone at our school anymore. After my divorce last year, I needed a fresh start, so I left the city and moved to this quiet suburban area about an hour away. The housing market was brutal, either ridiculously expensive or complete dumps. Then I found this gorgeous house, 4 bedrooms, a massive kitchen, I love cooking, and the most beautiful garden I'd seen in my price range. The landlord seemed nice enough during the viewing. He was this middle-aged guy who kept talking about how his family had owned the property for generations, but now mostly used it for rental income. The rent was surprisingly reasonable for such a nice place, which should have been my first red flag, but I was too excited about finally finding somewhere perfect. I signed a 2-year lease and moved in 3 months ago. Everything was going great. I'd set up my home office in one of the spare bedrooms. I work in software development, started a small vegetable garden, and was finally feeling settled after the mess of my divorce. Then yesterday, I got a bizarre text from my landlord saying he needed to discuss something important and would be coming over in 10 minutes. I was in the middle of a work meeting but had to step away when he showed up with this woman, who turned out to be his wife. The landlord excitedly announced that their daughter was getting married in 6 weeks. I politely offered my congratulations, not expecting what came next. His wife chimed in, declaring they had decided my house would be perfect for the wedding venue and had already started sending out invitations. I thought they were joking at first, but they were dead serious. When I pointed out that I lived here and this was my home, the landlord casually explained they'd need me to move out for about 3 weeks for setup, the wedding, and cleanup, plus they'd have guests staying here too. I refused, reminding them that I had a lease. His wife protested, bringing up how this was their family home, and they'd had all their important celebrations here. The landlord tried to negotiate, suggesting I could stay with family or at a hotel, even offering to cover 1 week of hotel costs. I explained that I worked from home and couldn't just pack up my entire office and life for 3 weeks. That's when things got ugly. The landlord got confrontational, reminding me that he owned the property and I just paid to live there. He claimed the lease gave him the right to access the property with notice, which he was giving me now. When I pointed out that this was meant for maintenance and emergencies, not for hosting events, his wife started crying about how I was ruining their daughter's special day. The next morning I woke up to find people in my garden, setting up some kind of arch. The landlord was supervising them like nothing was wrong. When I confronted him about the illegal nature of what he was doing, he dismissed my concerns, saying he'd already paid deposits to vendors and everything was arranged, calling me completely unreasonable. I threatened to call the police, but he just laughed, confidently declaring that no cop would side with a tenant over a property owner. Well, surprise. I called both the police and my lawyer friend. The police made them remove everything and my lawyer friend helped me file for an emergency injunction to prevent them from entering the property without my permission except for genuine maintenance issues. But it gets better. Remember how I said the rent was surprisingly reasonable? Turns out the landlord had been illegally avoiding taxes on the rental income for years. My lawyer friend discovered this during her investigation. She also found out they'd pulled this same stunt with previous tenants, forcing them out for various family events and keeping their security deposits when they complained. Now they're facing an investigation from the tax authorities, and I'm part of a joint lawsuit with 3 previous tenants. Their daughter found out what they were doing and was mortified. She called me personally to apologize and explained she'd rather have a small backyard wedding at her fiancé's parents' house than be part of her parents' scheme. I'm still living in the house with much better locks and security cameras. My lease is ironclad and now they can't even try to raise my rent or evict me without facing additional legal scrutiny. Sometimes I see my landlord drive by slowly, glaring at the house, but that's all he can do now. His wife still sends me guilt-tripping texts about destroying their family traditions, but those go straight to my lawyer. I inherited my grandfather's pristine 1967 Chevrolet Impala about 6 months ago. He'd kept that car in perfect condition for decades, and it meant everything to him. Before he passed away, he made me promise to take good care of it, just like he did. I'm not much of a car person, but this vehicle means the world to me. It's the last connection I have to him. I work from home as a software developer, so the car mostly sits in my driveway. I only take it out for weekend drives to keep it running smoothly and to occasionally show it off at local car meets. That's where this whole mess started. Last month, I took the Impala to a classic car meetup in town. Lots of people were admiring it, including this woman who spent a good 30 minutes asking me questions about its history. She seemed genuinely interested, so I told her about my grandfather and how he'd preserved it all these years. There was another guy there, let's call him my mutual friend, who I knew casually from previous car meets. He and the woman chatted a bit, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Fast forward to last week. I was having my morning coffee when I heard strange noises coming from my driveway. Looking out the window, I saw someone trying to jimmy the car's door open with what looked like a coat hanger. I rushed outside and found this same woman from the car meet attempting to break into my grandfather's car. I yelled at her, demanding to know what she was doing. Karen, looking completely unfazed, told me she'd been trying to reach me and was there to pick up her car. When I told her it was my car, she dismissed me as ridiculous. She claimed our mutual friend had told her I was giving the car away and that I'd mentioned wanting to get rid of it at the car meet. I explained that I'd never said anything like that and told her the car had belonged to my grandfather and I was keeping it. Karen insisted that our mutual friend had specifically promised she could have it, claiming he'd told her I was looking to donate it to someone who would appreciate it more than me. Shocked, I told her I barely even spoken to that guy and he had no right to promise my car to anyone. Karen started getting angry, calling me selfish and demanding the keys, saying she'd already told everyone about her new car. When I told her I was calling the police, she actually encouraged me to do so, claiming the car was technically hers now since it had been promised to her and that I was the one trying to steal it back. I took out my phone and started recording while dialing the police, which only made her more furious. She started screaming about harassment and threatened to sue me for filming her without permission. When I pointed out she was literally trying to break into my car in my driveway, she just screamed louder about how it was her car and that our mutual friend had promised it to her, insisting that going back on a gift was illegal. When the police arrived, she actually tried to file a complaint against me. She showed them screenshots of conversations with our mutual friend where he apparently promised her my car. The officers quickly figured out what was really going on, especially after I showed them the vehicle registration and insurance papers in my name. But it didn't end there. Over the next few days, she started posting all over local Facebook groups about how I stole her car and harassed her. She even went as far as to show up at another car meet to tell everyone there that I was a scammer who preys on innocent car enthusiasts. I ended up having to file for a restraining order after she kept showing up at my house demanding the car. The final straw was when she tried to convince a local mechanic to make her a copy of my car key, claiming she was my wife and had locked herself out. The court hearing for the restraining order was quite something. She brought our mutual friend as a witness, but that backfired spectacularly. Under oath, he admitted he'd never actually talked to me about giving away the car. Apparently, he'd been trying to impress her by playing connected car guy and thought he could somehow convince me to part with the Impala later. The judge granted the restraining order immediately. It turned out she'd attempted similar scams before with other classic car owners in neighboring towns. The police were quite interested in that pattern of behavior, and last I heard, she's facing charges for attempted theft and filing false police reports. These days, I've installed security cameras around my property and added some extra security features to the garage. The Impala is safe and sound, and I still take it to car meets, just at different venues now. Sometimes people there recognize me from the Facebook drama and share their own Karen stories. It's become something of a running joke in the local car community, though I'm just glad it's over. And that mutual friend, he's been banned from most car meets in the area. Turns out trying to give away other people's classic cars isn't great for your reputation in the car enthusiast community. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.